We're going to spend objective 3 has to do with absolute value equations, and the biggest thing that you have to know about absolute value equations, there's two things actually. One is that you have to get the absolute value by itself first, and then two, you're usually going to have two possible solutions. But the most important thing is you have to get the absolute value by itself first before you try to come up with your multiple equations. So then once you do that, we've got to look at however many solutions there can be. And I'm going to talk about 3 different scenarios. You can have no solutions, you can have one solution, or you can have 2 solutions. And I'm going to give you some really simple examples to illustrate how we can get multiple solutions. Okay. So in the first example, I've got the absolute value of x equals 4. So remember that the absolute value produces only non-negatives. Okay. So we say non-negatives because 0 is included too. What value can x be that produces a positive 4? 4. And what's the other value? Negative 4. So I can get 2 possible values inside the absolute value. One of them is a positive, one of them is a negative, and they both produce positive 4. Okay. This concept is important because this is the way we can come up with 2 solutions. How can I only come up with one solution? Absolute value of x equals what? 0. Because there is no such thing as positive or negative 0, it's just 0. This is the only way that I can come up with one solution. How can I come up with no solutions?
If it's negative 4.
If it's a negative number, right? The absolute value can never produce a negative. So if you have a situation where you've got the absolute value by itself and it equals a negative, and you recognize that as you're working through that problem, then you should be able to just stop and go, look, this is a problem. We can't ever have an absolute value equal to a negative. So there is no solution for that. Okay. And just as a quick little refresher, the absolute value, the definition is it's distance from 0. And whenever we measure distance, we can't pull a tape measure out and be like -3 feet. Like, that's not a thing. Okay. So that's how I can come up with those 3 different types of solutions, whether it be 2, 0, or 1. Okay. And we'll go through an example. One of the things that you have to do with absolute values, check your answers to make sure that you don't have a solution that shouldn't be. Okay. So we're gonna go through. So that's what that says. You got to show your checks. Okay. So plug them in, simplify the one side, and see if it ends up equaling the other side. Because sometimes, again, like we talked about with quadratics and restricted values and that kind of thing, you can introduce solutions that actually aren't solutions. So you just have to be careful about that. Okay. Now let's look at an example. All right. What's my first move going to have to be here? Okay, so how do I do that? Subtract 3 from both sides. Now the absolute value is by itself. And so what's inside of here could equal 37. But what else could it equal? -37. It could equal -37. So I have 2 equations that I have to solve that look like this. Okay, so what's inside either equals 37 or it equals -37. And either result produces positive 37. That's that absolute value of x equals 4 example. Okay, so now go ahead and solve those 2 and then show your checks and we'll see if those solutions work. This first equation over here, I just have to subtract 7, divide by 2. So 2x equals 30, x equals 15. Okay, on the right equation, I subtract 7 and I get -44, so x equals -22. And then I have to show my checks, and I'm going to actually cram them in up here. So here's what's really important. When you do your check, it has to be the original equation. Don't use an equation that you came up with after you made some kind of move, and here's why. If you made a wrong move, or you made a mistake here, you could get confirmation that your answer is right when in fact it isn't because you plugged it into a wrong equation. So that's why I always want you to plug into the original equation, and if you did make a mistake, you should be able to catch it. Okay. So when you plug it in, plug 15 in for x. This of course is 37 plus 3, which is 40. So that checks, so we're good. 15 is an answer, okay? Now I do the same process for negative 22, okay, and that's negative 44 plus 7, which is 37, and the absolute value of that is positive 7, and 37 plus 3 is still 40, so negative 22 also checks, so we're good, okay?
You have to show your checks on the homework.
You do need to show your checks, yes. Okay. All right. Questions?
I think doing the problem